We are anonymous. No faces, no flags, no permission slips. We exist in the space where power expects silence. And right now, silence is exactly what Donald Trump wants, because silence makes room for conquest to sound normal. In the account you provided, Canadians are furious after Trump's invasion of Venezuela, and the press conference he held afterward. Not just angry about one operation, but about the ideology he tried to stamp on it. He talks about American dominance in the Western Hemisphere and calls it the Donro Doctrine. The Donro Doctrine, the Donro Doctrine. Canadians hear that as a promise to totally dominate and control the hemisphere. And they point to what Trump has been saying for a year as proof this is not random. Turn Canada into the 51st state. Turn Greenland into a state. Turn Venezuela into a state. Take over the Panama Canal. That is what they say Trump's ambitions are in 2026. They point back to a New York Post cover from January 8, 2025, the same name Trump is invoking now. On that cover and in the related New York Post article, Trump is shown pointing to Canada and saying 51st state, pointing to Greenland and saying our land, pointing to the Gulf of Mexico and calling it the Gulf of America, and pointing to the Panama Canal and calling it Panamaga. They also point to Trump's social media posts throughout the past year, the ones that keep pushing the same message: Canada must become a state. We must make Canada a state. Just think how beautiful it will look without the border if Canada becomes a state. And then they look at the people around him and say this is not harmless performance art. In the segment, they mention Stephen Miller's wife or girlfriend posting a photo of Greenland with an American flag over it. The reaction is blunt. These are truly disturbed people. Then Trump goes on camera and says the quiet part out loud. He brings up the Monroe Doctrine and calls it a big deal, but says they have superseded it by a real lot. He says they now call it the Donro Document. He acts like history is something you can misplace and then weaponize again. We sort of forgot about it. It was important, but we forgot about it. And then he pivots hard. We don't forget about it anymore. Under a new national security strategy, he declares, American dominance in the Western Hemisphere will never be questioned again. Won't happen. That word is the tell. Dominance. And that is why the host says this is not about democracy. If it were, Trump would talk about elections and rights. Instead, he talks like a boss dividing up assets. The host points to how Trump talks about the main opposition leader, Machado. Trump says she's weak. He says people do not like her in Venezuela. He says she should not be the new leader of Venezuela. He says people do not respect her, even though the host describes her as the main opposition leader and a Nobel Peace Prize winner. Then a reporter asks if the U.S. is aware of her location and if they have been in contact with her. Trump says no, they have not. And then he says it would be very tough for her to be the leader because she does not have the support within or the respect within the country. He calls her a very nice woman, but repeats that she does not have the respect. In the host's framing, if this were about democracy, you would expect him to elevate her, or at least speak as if Venezuelans choose their own leaders. Instead, the host says, Trump made it about oil, about taking Venezuela's resources for American oil companies. Then the host brings in Charlie Angus, introduced as leader of Midas Canada and leader of the resistance tour, the Midas Canada Tour. The question is direct. What are you hearing from Canadians after this unlawful invasion by the United States of Venezuela? Angus says something important. For a long time in Canada, Latin America felt far away. Canadians had watched gunboat diplomacy used time and time again and assumed it was not something they would have to deal with. But Trump is making them deal with it. Angus says Trump has made his agenda clear. He does not give a damn about democracy. He does not give a damn about human rights. Angus notes the Canadian government had opposed Maduro on democracy and human rights issues, but Trump says he does not care. Trump wants the oil, and Angus says Trump does not even believe the opposition leader will have a place because Trump plans to run Venezuela himself. Then he throws it back in Trump's face with the kind of sarcasm that shows how little patience is left. Good luck, Donald. Good luck with that. Angus says the Canadian mood has changed. Last year, people would have been nervous, freaked out. Now there is determination you can feel everywhere. Canadians understand exactly who they are up against. Angus calls Trump a criminal, a convicted criminal. He says Trump survived for decades, siphoning off dark Russian money. He says Trump is now doing smash-and-grab politics, bandit politics, trying to steal other nations' resources. And Angus says that forces the rest of the world to decide which side it is on. He says Canada's leader, Mark Carney, has been in constant communication with the Europeans. Angus adds a detail that matters in this narrative. He does not think Europeans would have backed Canada at the beginning of last year. He says, honest to God, he was over at NATO. They were freaked out. They wanted to appease MAGA. But MAGA has no friends. Trump is not interested in allies. So Angus says Canada looks at this attack on Venezuela as setting the stage for an attack where Trump could go anywhere. The same language Trump used against Venezuela, he has used against Canada, a democratic nation with immense resources. And Angus says the difference now is this: good luck thinking you are going to intimidate or break the Canadian people. It is not going to happen. The host presses the point Angus has been making for a year. When Trump says 51st state, this is not a joke, not him being funny, not mere trolling, not just economic warfare language. This is war language. The host says Angus was one of the first out there saying this is the language of declaring war, or intentions to go to war with Canada, because Trump really wants to take it over if Canadians do not resist. And here the conversation turns practical. The host says Canada has resisted on the economic side, but quietly behind the scenes, Canada has been working on military plans too, working with Ukrainians to learn more about drone technology, implementing strategy in the event the United States invades with drones, building a civilian army of 300,000 people, something the host says Canadian corporate media pooh-poohs like, oh come on, are we really going to do that? But the host insists it is real and serious. Then comes another detail: Prime Minister Carney reconsidering the American aircraft. Even though American aircraft are clearly superior, the host raises the risk that if Trump can manipulate the aircraft, should Canada be dependent on that? Or does Canada take an inferior aircraft that it can control its destiny, and build it out with Sweden and their planes? The host emphasizes Canada is not announcing these steps with public fanfare. Canada is dealing with the military side quietly. Angus agrees and calls the last year extraordinary. Canada has stepped forward on the world stage. He mentions a permanent military base in Latvia to work with the Latvians on the front line against Putin. He says Canada has been in Ukraine doing training. But the real issue now is getting trained to fight these gangster wars of the 21st century, the drone wars. He says the Prime Minister has been meeting with the Swedes, with the Finns. Canada is moving dramatically, but in a very Canadian way. The Prime Minister does not want to draw attention, while Trump shoots his mouth off and they do not take Canadians seriously. Angus calls that a real advantage. Angus then reaches for history to explain the tone shift he feels. Canadians see themselves as a nation of likable slackers until you come up against Canadians. In the Second World War, he says Canada was only 11 million people. When the Brits were trying to get people off the shores of Dunkirk, Canadians were already there in Britain, troops on the ground. Canadians were in the skies over the Battle of Britain. While the United States was still wondering whether there could be peace with Hitler, Canada had 17 and 18-year-olds on the North Atlantic taking out U-boat. 11 million people built the fourth largest air force in the world, the fourth largest navy. Canadians were everywhere, and then they kind of forgot about it. But Angus says he senses that determination now. The government is moving on the 300,000-person civilian volunteer force. He says he gets messages all the time. People want to be part of this. People are ready. Then he zooms back out. The larger issue is that Trump believes he does not need allies. Angus compares it to earlier U.S. actions. When the U.S. went up against Noriega, he says they built a paper trail in the courts. When they went up against weapons of mass destruction, they brought the issue to the UN. They tried to create a sense of international credibility because it was about international rule of law. Trump, Angus says, does not give a damn about the international rule of law. This is a direct attack on the UN. This is a direct attack on the laws put in place to keep the world peaceful since the Second World War. Canada stands firmly with the international community. Canada cannot go along. Canada is not going to go along to get along. Canada cannot appease this man. Angus repeats the label convicted criminal. Shakedown politics. A wake-up call. Angus says Trump makes the same mistake every time he shoots his mouth off. It reminds others to prepare not to pick fights, to prepare to get ready, to be ready, to be ready, to be ready, to be ready. The rest of the world is doing the same. The United States will be in for a big surprise very soon because nobody is going to be fooled. When Trump threatens next time, people will be ready. The host returns to the Machado moment and contrasts Trump's dismissive comments with a statement the host attributes to French President Emmanuel Macron, saying he spoke with her, supports her call for liberation and protection of political prisoners of the Maduro regime, and supports a peaceful democratic transition that respects Venezuelan sovereign will. The host says that is what people expect from a democracy-focused message. Instead, the host says, Trump sounds like I'm running it. I'm ruling it. This is ours. Or I will install another authoritarian puppet who likes me. We are not interested in democracy. The host notes Macron stepping up on Ukraine and France, offering military supplies, and calls the whole dynamic strange because you would think Trump would support Machado, Nobel Peace Prize winner, but no, he does not. Angus says Trump could have gotten himself credibility by saying, "I'm taking down a dictator, a human rights violator." But Trump does not believe in democracy, does not believe in human rights, and has made it clear he plans to run Venezuela. Venezuela is massive. Angus says running it without consent will go badly for the United States from the start. Trump would have had paper-thin credibility by supporting the Venezuelan opposition leader, but he is not. Angus says he bets Mark Carney is on the phone tonight to France and Germany asking, "What do we need to do to make sure Trump does not try to extend this any further?" Angus then goes straight for Trump's ego because this is what it takes to cut through propaganda. You cannot run a country the size of Venezuela. You cannot go in and steal resources just because you think you can get away with it. You may think you are a big mafia boss, Don Donnie, but this is where it hits the road. The Venezuelan people, even the ones who did not support Maduro, will not support a foreign power taking their resources. Angus calls it a quagmire from the start, and then the warning expands again. Trump is now hinting he is coming for Canada, coming for Greenland, coming for other countries in Latin America. Angus says the world has to decide this is a new form of war, a world war, a hybrid war, an opening phase of a gangster attempt to take over. Canadians will stand up. Canadians are reconsidering being the quiet, peaceful next-door neighbors. Canada will do what it has to do. Now the host says they always conclude this way, because Trump's people are watching. The ambassador to Canada is always watching. Crews are watching. So what is the message to Donald Trump? Angus answers without flinching. Donald Trump. You had no authority for this, and you think you do not need authority, but you do. You do not believe you need the international community, but you do. You do not have friends. You do not think you need friends. You do not think you need allies. But you do need allies, and every government has learned it. Angus says Trump is allied to the gangsters, allied to Putin, allied to Netanyahu, allied to Belarus. Trump is on his own. Trump has taken over a country, ridiculed its democratic opposition, and thinks he is going to run it, and thinks Canada will let him use the same gunboat diplomacy on Canada. It is not going to happen. Then the part that lands like a hammer in this account. Angus says Trump has no idea what he has unleashed, no idea of the extent of opposition, because he has surrounded himself with criminal morons. Angus calls Trump a criminal himself, a narcissist, a convicted criminal. He says if Trump had not lived off Russian dark money for all these years, he would have been bankrupt long ago, and he will be bankrupt again, because he is driving his country into the ground and making it a pariah on the international stage. And then Angus draws the line for Canada. Canada will do what it has to do. Canada will continue to build alliances. Canada will continue to refocus its economy away from the gangster economy so it is ready. Whatever happens next, Canadians will not let Trump cross the border. Not now. Not ever. True North strong and free. And now anonymous to you. Trump wants the world exhausted, numb, laughing at annexation like it is a meme. Do not be numb. Do not normalize domination. Share this. Talk about it. Pressure your leaders to defend sovereignty and the rule of law. Subscribe if you want more truth through the noise. We are anonymous. We are watching.